Did you know that over 50 billion burgers are served annually in the US alone? That's right, and as an effect of this popularity, Burger King, one of the giants in the fast food industry, has grown into a global phenomenon, with thousands of outlets worldwide. Now, what's intriguing is that Burger King wasn't always called Burger King. Its original name was Insta-Burger King. Not to mention, Burger King's iconic Whopper sandwich, which was introduced in 1957, has become one of the most famous burgers in the world. But if we want to understand this story, we need to look back much further, to a time when the burger was created, a little over a century ago. The burger itself began with the domestication of cattle 10,000 years ago in Mesopotamia. From there, humans had steady access to meat to cook and experiment with. Fast forward to the 1st century AD, when the Romans prepared the first string of hamburger meat, which consisted of a ground or minced meat disc containing pine nuts, pepper, and wine. It would seem that humanity was finally onto something. Fast forward again to the 12th century. In Hamburg, Germany, a city that grew into a trading hub where beef delicacies were very popular, and the wide-grown concept of eating beef was really born. Further along, in 1848, political revolutions shook the 39 states of the German Confederation, spurring an increase in German immigration to the United States. And surprise, surprise, German people brought German food, causing businesses like beer gardens to flourish within American cities. German butchers also brought traditional German meat preparations, creating the Hamburg-style chopped steak. In the mid-19th century, raw chopped steak and ground beef became a popular prescription for digestive issues. However, it was noted with many that eating raw meat wouldn't exactly help your digestive problems and might even make them worse. So in 1867, New York physician James H. Salisbury put forward that cooked beef patties, well, they might be healthier than the raw variety. And so the Salisbury steak, a simple ground beef patty, was born and quickly adopted by cooks and physicians throughout the 19th century. Around the same time, the first meat grinders for home use became widely available, rocketing ground beef into popularity. The hamburger seems to have jumped from the plate to the bun in the last few decades of the 19th century, though the site of its creation is highly contested. Lunch wagons, fair stands, and roadside restaurants across the country all lay claim to the burger, but whatever its origin, the dish was widely introduced at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, where millions of Americans tried this new and delicious combination. But it all came crashing down for the burger just 2 years later, when Upton Sinclair published his famous novel, The Jungle. In it, he detailed the harsh life of the working class in the meatpacking industry, among others, detailing the unsanitary conditions and cruel treatment of animals. However, upon releasing the book to the public, they only seemed to care about the quality of their food, especially their ground beef. Ground beef was easy to degrade, with the addition of fillers, meat scraps, and preservatives, all for the sake of profit. And hamburgers became the prime suspect of this. However, current burger lovers don't need to change their diet, since President Theodore Roosevelt piggybacked off public opinion to pass the Pure Food and Drug Act, as well as the Meat Inspection Act after the book was published. Basically, both acts ensure that meat is processed and packed in a very sanitary manner. However, even with all of these changes, hamburgers might have remained on the outskirts of American cuisine. Its reputation could not be recovered, even if the meat inside it was now safe. This changed, however, in 1921 when Billy Ingram and Walter Anderson opened their first White Castle restaurant in Wichita, Kansas. To fight the burger's bad reputation, they covered their restaurant in stainless steel and gleaming porcelain, becoming bastions of cleanliness, health, and hygienes. Ingram even commissioned a medical school study to show the health benefits of hamburgers, concluding that someone could survive on a White Castle-only diet and be completely fine. Their system, which also included on-site meat grinding, proved to work very well, inspiring tons of other national hamburger chains. And I'd like to continue on the story of White Castle, but that deserves a separate video. If you'd like me to make that video, let me know by hitting the subscribe button. Anyhow, one of, if not the most popular restaurants to emerge in this time was McDonald's, founded in San Bernardino in 1948. This iconic restaurant chain helped introduce the hamburger to the world with the support of the American Armed Service members abroad during World War II. Another popular chain at the time was Wimpy, a franchise of burger bars that were named after a hamburger-eating Popeye character of the same name. Although starting as an American restaurant, J. Linus and Company bought the franchise rights to run Wimpy restaurants over in England, opening their first location in central London. Wimpy soon became far more popular in the UK than in the US. But one of the most exciting stories about burger joints is about Burger King. As I stated earlier, the burger brand that we've all come to know actually began as Insta-Burger King, a fast food restaurant founded in 1953 in Jacksonville, Florida by Keith Kramer and his uncle-in-law, Matthew Burns. They were inspired by McDonald's to create their restaurant and incorporated a particular grill machine called the Insta-Broiler, which fortunately for them they had bought the rights to. This was a machine capable of cooking 12 beef patties in a wire basket, allowing them to be cooked from both sides simultaneously. Over time, the restaurant grew into a chain with several franchises, attracting a pair of Cornell business students, James McLamore and David Edgerton. In 1954, they purchased an Insta-Broiler and an Insta-Burger King franchise in the up-and-coming Miami metropolitan area. That same year, they co-founded the Burger King of Miami Corporation. However, upon opening, they found that the Insta-Broiler was prone to degradation from the beef patty's grease drippings, prompting Edgerton to invent a mechanized gas grill called a flame broiler in 1957. The new machine had stationary burners that cooked meat on a moving chain, resulting in a similar cooking rate without any of the old problems. That same year, McLamore invented the famous Whopper after noticing the competition, mainly McDonald's, was only selling small hamburgers and others were succeeding with large burgers. The original sandwich sold for 37 cents and was named the Whopper because it conveyed the image of something big. By 1959, the Insta-Burger King chain had spread across Florida with over 40 locations. But Kramer and Burns, they knew more about hamburgers than running a business. In fact, they ran into financial difficulties. Seizing the opportunity, McLamore and Edgerton, who already owned multiple stores, bought them out, moving from franchisees to owners, which restructured and revitalized the entire company. One of their first changes was installing flame broilers in every franchise restaurant. This is where McLamore and Edgerton dropped the Insta and became Burger King. In terms of marketing, they already had a head start with the Burger King mascot created in 1955, becoming a staple in their advertising for the next 60 years. They also already began airing commercials on TV in 1958 to advertise the Whopper with their Burger King, home of the Whopper campaign. This helped get customers outside of Florida. By 1961, Burger King and the Whopper were known across the United States, and most people had already tasted their delicious meals. McLamore and Edgerton also created various companies to help run their new empire. In 1962, they made the Distrong Company to distribute food to their stores. Plus, there was Dave Moore Industries, which actually built the Burger King kitchen parts. All this led to the growth of Burger King, allowing them to reach Puerto Rico outside the continental US by 1963. And just a year later, they established Whopper College to train new franchisees with the necessary technical knowledge. But expansion didn't always go smoothly. For example, when McLamore and Edgerton decided to open their first Burger King in Illinois, they were in for a rude awakening. You see, since 1952, Gene and Betty Hoots owned and ran a restaurant called Frigid Queen. It was primarily a soft-serve ice cream shop, but in 1964, they expanded their menu to include hamburgers and French fries. And here's where things get complicated. You see, with the new menu came a transformation in the name from Frigid Queen into Burger King in 1957. The name was registered as a state trademark in Illinois just 2 years later. In 1967, when there were about 50 corporate Burger King locations, the Illinois-based entrepreneurs, who also had a restaurant called Burger King, decided to take action. They brought a lawsuit against them in 1968, saying their state trademark gave them exclusive rights to the Burger King name in Illinois. Burger King argued that their federal trademark overrode the Hoots trademark. Ultimately, the court decided that the Hoots had exclusive rights to the name within a 20-mile radius of their restaurant location, and that Burger King had the rights everywhere else. Today, even with Gene and Betty Hoots now retired, the closest corporate Burger King is 25 miles away. But this wasn't the only time that Burger King faced off against someone who held the rights to their chosen branding. When Burger King expanded to Texas, they were greeted by the Whopper Burger, a restaurant chain founded by Frank Bates in 1955. He held the rights to the name Whopper in Texas, preventing Burger King from using the name of their iconic dish. A Burger King restaurant was opened in Texas for a brief time, renaming the sandwich to the Deluxe, but the store did not survive. Nothing changed until 1983 when Frank Bates passed away. He left the restaurant chain to his wife, who sold it to several Burger King franchises. They sold the chain to Burger King Corporate directly, and in 1985, all Whopper Burger King locations became Burger King official. Now, would you believe that something like this happened a third time? Let me explain. Unsurprising to some, a mini chain of restaurants called the Burger King Drive-In was founded in Alberta, Canada by William R. Jarvis and James Duncan Rhee in 1956. The restaurant was initially imagined as a part of the Dairy Queen chain, but when they rejected his request for a franchise, the duo opened their first restaurant. Back then, it was called Dairy Drive-In, but 2 years later, their lease expired, and they moved shop to a new building called Burger King. Their chain also featured Kentucky Fried Chicken until their relationship soured and KFC refused to renew their licensing agreement. In the mid-1960s, the US Burger King planned to expand to Canada by William R. Jarvis and James Duncan Rhee in 1956, where Jarvis and Rhee had already copyrighted the name. However, they agreed, allowing the Burger King of Florida to use the name anywhere except Alberta north of the 52nd parallel. This area was reserved for their local chain, and so it was. Burger King Corporate opened its first store in Canada in 1969. Most of the Burger King drive-in restaurant locations were sold to KFC in 1990, but Jarvis and Rhee kept the Burger King trademark until 1995. In August of that year, they finally gave it up, selling the naming rights in northern Alberta to the US company for $1 million. This was the last region of North America they had yet to expand into. Immediately, Burger King announced they were entering the northern Alberta market and soon opening locations there. As Burger King grew into an international restaurant chain, it was only natural that the company would undergo many changes in ownership. In 1967, for example, Burger King was acquired by the Pillsbury Company for $18 million, with over 270 stores and 8,000 employees. That's over $160 million when adjusting for today's inflation. The Burger King Corporation became a subsidiary of Pillsbury, and it was only with their help that the chain grew into the McDonald's contender that we know today. In 1968, ad agency Benton, Burton, Dustin, and Osborne were hired to develop the bigger the burger, the better the burger promotion. In 1974, they created the famous Have It Your Way campaign that has remained the brand's slogan. That same year, franchises were required to use the hospitality system, or multiple lines to speed up the service. This was further improved with the introduction of drive-through windows in 1975. It proved to be a profitable investment, with drive-thrus accounting for 60% of all fast food sales by 1987. But I should point out that Pillsbury-owned Burger King had problems of its own. You see, when Pillsbury first took over, they began to crack down on large franchise owners who thought they could run Burger King outlets better than Burger King themselves. The most notable example of this was Billy and Jimmy Trotter, a pair of wealthy brothers from Louisiana who bought their first franchise in 1963. By 1969, they owned almost 24 Burger King locations and formed their own company, Self-Service Restaurants Incorporated, to run them. By 1970, their purchasing, training, and inspection system had grown to over 350 stores nationwide, but they still wanted more. With the lucrative Chicago market franchise deciding to sell, Billy Trotter flew to the Windy City in the middle of a snowstorm to buy the territory for $8 million. And when Pillsbury executives got there the next day, They found out that their own franchise had cheated them. The following year, the Trotters bought out a pair of steakhouse chains, taking the name of one, and in the process, solidifying their moniker in Burger King history. Now known as Chart House, the Trotters earned annual sales of $32 million and were finally ready to take over the Burger King chain. In 1973, they made a $100 million offer to Pillsbury to buy out Burger King, which they declined. When that failed, they suggested a second idea: merge their companies and spin off Burger King into a separate entity, but again, no bites. After the double Stonewall, relations between Pillsbury and Chart House got even worse. In 1979, when Chart House purchased several Burger Kings in Boston and Houston, Pillsbury sued the selling franchises for not respecting their contractual right to first refusal. They won the case and ended up preventing the sale. However, the two eventually reached a settlement where Chart House could keep the Houston locations, but Pillsbury got the rest. This is partially why, in the 1980s, Chart House spun off its Burger King restaurants to focus on higher-end chains and attracting new customers. But Chart House's Burger King holdings company, Diversey Foods, was eventually acquired by Pillsbury in 1984 for $390 million, reuniting their chains with its permanent company. One way Pillsbury helped to grow Burger King, compete against McDonald's, and strengthen their corporation was to poach the McDonald's executive, Donald N. Smith. Hired as CEO in 1978, Smith instituted several sweeping changes that helped revitalize Burger King. One of these changes was restructuring the company's franchise agreements to exert tighter control on franchisees. Now, they weren't allowed to own franchises in other chains. Additionally, franchisees were forbidden from living more than an hour drives from home. This encouraged loyalty and cut down on absentee ownership, ensuring that something like Chart House could never happen again. These changes caused many unprofitable franchise owners to drop out, cutting off Burger King's dead weight. But Smith also noticed a fatal flaw. It was that Burger King only owned 34% of the land where its products were sold. It seemed that Burger King grew by selling broad territorial rights, whereas his former employer, McDonald's, leased stores to franchisees and demanded high consistency. The land was also an appreciating asset and source of tax deductions, not to mention that if you literally owned the land beneath their feet, you had a very unique influence over uncooperative franchisees. Soon, it was also required for Burger King to lease the property of any new store to franchisees. This policy would allow the company to take over failing stores or evict owners who wouldn't conform to company guidelines. Donald Smith also improved Burger King by expanding its menu, introducing the chain's fish sandwich to combat McDonald's Long John Silver, and its first chicken sandwich to compete with KFC and Wendy's. He also broadened the product line by adding the specialty sandwich line and many other non-hamburger sandwiches. This was also one of the first attempts by a major fast food chain to target a specific demographic: 18 to 34-year-olds. Members of this demographic would supposedly spend more money on higher quality products. Smith wasn't done there, as he next tackled Burger King's lack of a breakfast menu. McDonald's had already proved it could be a profitable addition, but Burger King's special equipment made it difficult to whip up new morning dishes. Their flame broilers couldn't be adapted to breakfast meals the way McDonald's grills could, so Smith focused on developing foods that could be made with existing equipment. It took some time, but the answer was finally found with the croissantwich in 1983 and then the French toast sticks in 1985. Unfortunately, this was only after Smith was poached again by PepsiCo in 1980. However, after just 3 short years as CEO, Donald Smith produced a 15% increase in sales, thoroughly cementing Burger King as the number 2 fast food burger chain, right behind McDonald's. After Smith left Burger King, sales started to decline system-wide. The company had to act fast, so it appointed Norman E. Brinker as the new CEO, charging him to turn the company around and strengthen its position against McDonald's as the main competitor. Brinker had previously run the Steak and Ale restaurant chain, which was also bought by Pillsbury, and hence he was already working as the executive vice president of restaurant operations at Pillsbury until he got reappointed. Brinker planned to initiate an advertising campaign that claimed Burger King's burgers were bigger and better than McDonald's. In a series of commercials, Brinker called out McDonald's by name, sparking what came to be known as the Burger Wars. These were possibly the first political-style attack ads in the food industry, whereas fast food companies previously only made illusions about their competitors. Despite the controversy, the ad campaign boosted store sales just as Brinker wanted. However, an unintended effect was a lawsuit from angered McDonald's executives against all parties involved in the ad campaign. This included Burger King, J. Walter Thompson, their ad agency at the time, and actress Sarah Michelle Gellar, now known for roles in Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Scooby-Doo, who appeared in the TV commercials as a child. The suit was settled the following year with undisclosed terms. Brinker continued to head the Burger King Corporation until 1982, when he was promoted to president of Pillsbury's food service division, which included more chains than just Burger King. He stayed there for a few more years before leaving in 1984 to create the Dallas-based Chili's restaurant chain. Burger King continued expanding globally, opening their first European Burger King in Madrid, Spain, and a training center for their European franchises in London a decade later. That same year, in 1985, Burger King also began a $100 million program to remodel their restaurants with natural materials such as wood and plants instead of their current plastic. They also wholly computerized cooking and cashier register operations so that even the most unskilled worker could do their job. The fast food chain continued introducing new items to its menu to keep up with competition. And at this point, their menu was wide. For example, they had the bacon double cheeseburger. And to satisfy their more health-conscious customer, they also introduced a salad bar. These efforts proved successful, with average sales per restaurant reaching about $1 million. By 1986, the company had nearly 5,000 restaurants, operating in 25 countries, generating $4.5 billion in sales. However, not all of Burger King's ventures were successful. In fact, many would argue that their most notable problems came from ad campaigns. For example, when the company added half an ounce of meat to the Whopper, making it larger than McDonald's Quarter Pounder, they launched a $30 million campaign to promote it. This featured celebrities promoting the sandwich in their Herb and Nerd, or This is a Burger King Town, and the Fast Food for Fast Time campaigns. However, all of them were flops, failing to generate the sales Burger King had hoped for, forcing them to pull the campaign. Adweek described the marketing fails as, quote, ill-conceived marketing and downright sloppy strategic planning. It was only in 1988 that the We Do It Like You Do It campaign began to get results. In addition to these failures, lawsuits complicated Pillsbury's holdings over Burger King. Two lawsuits filed by investors against Pillsbury, one in the company's home state of Minnesota and the other where it was incorporated, Delaware, questioned the legality of the stock tender plan. And surprisingly, these three events actually forced Pillsbury to relinquish its bid over Burger King and its subsidiaries when British company Grand Metropolitan bought it in November of 1988 for $5.7 billion. That's $14.6 billion today. And so to elaborate, one of Grand Met's first moves was to dig themselves out of Burger King's advertising mess. In 1988, the new parent company set about reevaluating all aspects of the programs, from the messages the company sent to their customers to the possibility of dropping the advertising agency that it worked with. So after a 6-month evaluation, Burger King dropped the agency in favor of a two-way combination of Darcy, Macias, Benton, and Bulls for overall programs and Saatchi & for specific advertising programs, such as introducing new products. Grand Met hoped this dual partnership would help combine the best minds in the advertising industry to establish a brand identity. This culminated in the Sometimes You Gotta Break the Rules ad campaign In 1989, Grand Met also changed Burger King's soft drink contract from Pepsi to Coca-Cola, which had partnered with Burger King in the past. But that was only until 1983 when Pepsi stole the $444 million contract. Despite extreme debate over the contract, it was renewed for a second term in 1987, keeping Pepsi in the fold for just a bit longer with a deal that strengthened marketing and advertising ties between Burger King and Pepsi. Throughout their partnership, Pepsi sponsored over 100 cross promotions and product tie-ins, but the contract only lasted 3 more years, partially due to Pepsi's growth as a restaurant operator with its fast food division, now known as Yum Brands. Burger King's classic Distron distribution company was also overhauled, becoming a much more maligned part of Burger King's operations throughout the years. But in 1989, they decided to separate the buying and distribution functions it performed for the burger chain. Distron bought and distributed most foods and supplied almost half of the 5,800 BK restaurants at the time, but astonishingly had been unprofitable for a number of years. Other franchises have begun using independent fast food restaurant distributors that are cheaper or nearby. Then, on top of all these changes to Burger King's production and distribution, Grand Met sought to improve things for the customer, introducing the BK Broiler in 1990, Burger King's first significant chicken sandwich since 1977, attracting more health-conscious customers and selling over 1 million sandwiches a day after lunch. They also introduced BK Expressway, a new store format for locations where a traditional restaurant layout was impractical. This included kiosk-type stores that could be placed at sporting venues and airports, or just drive-thrus with minimal dining rooms. These stores operated with a condensed menu and were significantly cheaper to develop than traditional restaurants, but challenges were still on the horizon. Things were going well for Grand Met's Burger King until 1999, when Hurricane Andrew destroyed the company's headquarters. The highest storm surge levels were recorded at 16.9 feet, and the building suffered more than $24 million in damages. The company was forced out of the office, and roughly 300 of its 700-member workforce were left homeless, all while in the midst of a significant production push. After the storm, Burger King CEO Barry Gibson started a program to help the company recover, but these efforts were really helped by the planning that they did beforehand. You see, the team was very busy before the storm even made landfall. Company data was moved to Seattle, Washington before the storm even struck, protecting critical records. At the same time, a temporary command center was established at the Doral Resort and Country Club in Miami within 8 days of the hurricane passing. Additional corporate operations were temporarily decentralized and handled by regional offices. The facility would eventually be rebuilt, finally reopening in September of 1993. That year, Gibbons stepped down as CEO and was succeeded by James Adamson, who had been training for this moment since he became Burger King's COO all the way back in 1991. His most crucial initiative addressed the critical areas of quality, value, and image. He improved the quality of products by increasing the size of the BK Broiler, the BK Big Fish, and the hamburger by more than 50%, after much of the competition had already done so. He added a value menu and special promotions such as the 99-cent Whopper. He improved his image with the much-needed, successful ad campaign, Get Your Burger's Worth, which emphasized the very relatable, back-to-basics approach of a good value. This led to trimming the unwieldy menu, removing 40 items, and focusing on burgers, fries, and drinks. By early 1995, Adamson's programs had increased same-store sales by 6.6% and overall sales by 28%. However, like Smith, Adamson was also poached by Denny's when they made him an offer to take the helm in 1995. Even so, Grand Met furthered Burger King's reach by purchasing the British-based Wimpy burger chain. The Disney tie-ins increased sales among children, while Wimpy restaurants fueled Burger King's expansion into Europe. Grand Met converted nearly 400 Wimpy locations into Burger Kings. They also partnered with the Walt Disney Company to tie in with Disney films such as Beauty and the Beast or Pinocchio. They partnered once again in 1994 for the blockbuster hit The Lion King. However, Disney broke the deal and signed with their competitor, McDonald's, and ultimately, Burger King signed a new contract with DreamWorks for future tie-ins with their animated movies in 1996. Burger King continued reaching out to children with the launch of the Burger King Kids Club in 1990, with over 1 million kids signing up in the first 2 months alone. By 1996, membership was at 5 million, and the number of Kids Club's meals sold each month had increased from 6.1 million in 1990 to almost 12 million. In 1997, Grand Met merged with the Irish brewing company Guinness to form Diageo plc, seemingly ignoring Burger King in favor of its alcoholic beverages such as Guinness or Johnnie Walker. Be that as it may, that same year, US President Bill Clinton selected Burger King to work with at the White House to establish a welfare to work condition to help Americans prepare for work and to find jobs. Following this, in 1998, Burger King opened its 10,000th restaurant in Sydney, Australia, and created the Burger King Corporation / McLamore Foundation to provide scholarships for deserving youth. The very next year, BK announced the transformation of its restaurants and unveiled its iconic crescent logo, which persisted until 2021. Another moment of note occurred in 2001 during the attack on New York, when a Burger King restaurant near Ground Zero was used as a temporary NYPD HQ, medical center, and morgue. The Burger King Corporation and its franchise also contributed $5.1 million in cash and in-kind contributions to victims of the September 11th attack. Contributions included sales of flag decals at Burger King restaurants and preparing sandwiches for relief workers. However, good times don't last forever, and Burger King declined once again as McDonald's grew into the giant that it is today. Diageo ended up selling Burger King to private equity financiers in 2002 for $1.5 billion, namely the Texas Pacific Group, Bain Capital, and Goldman Sachs Capital Partners. This was the first time the company was privately held since 1967. The new owners moved to revitalize and reorganize the company with plans to take the company public within just 2 years. They began by renaming the BK parent company to Burger King Brands. That year, Burger King celebrated the 45th anniversary of the Whopper with a new tagline, "Burger King, you got it," and introduced the BK Veggie, the Chicken Whopper, and the Chicken Whopper Jr. In 2004, Burger King launched the Have It Your Way low-carb line featuring bunless, original, and chicken Whoppers. The investment group continued revitalizing the company with a new advertising agency and campaigns, a revamped menu strategy, and a series of programs designed to revitalize individual stores. They also introduced a new restaurant concept called the BK Whopper Bar, allowing customers in stores to see the burgers being made. This was similar to the idea behind the Benihana Steakhouse chain, but more familiar to Starbucks customers, with workers being called Whopperistas. And this was a good moment. Although taking the company public was delayed until 2006, all their hard work had paid off. When Burger King began trading on the New York Stock Exchange in 2006, the initial public offering garnered $425 million in equity proceeds, one of the biggest IPOs of a US-based restaurant chain ever. The proceeds from the sale were used to help TPG pay back a loan they took out to pay dividends to other investment firms. Wall Street investors weren't alarmed by the large payout due to the increased financial stability of Burger King because of TPG's changes. However, despite the new owner's success, the effects of the 2007-2010 financial crisis wore down their hard work and weakened the company. The falling value of Burger King eventually led to TPG divesting its interest in the company and selling it to 3G Capital of Brazil for $3.6 billion in 2010. Analysis from financial firms have agreed that 3G would have to invest heavily in the company to reverse its backslide. After the deal was confirmed, Burger King's stock was removed from the New York Stock Exchange, ending its 4-year period as a public company. This was intended to help repair the company's gaps and weaknesses while figuring out a way to compete with McDonald's without worrying about pleasing shareholders. And so in 2011, Burger King began a year-long restructure of the business, which included advertising programs, restaurant remodeling, and a revamp of its menu. By 2012, the company was doing well enough to be taken public once again, with 3G retaining a controlling interest. In 2014, Burger King merged with Canadian donut and fast food chain Tim Hortons, previously owned by Wendy's. After the merger, the two chains maintained separate operations, with Tim Hortons getting Burger King's support for international growth. A new parent company named Restaurant Brands International was formed and, controversially, headquartered in Ontario, Canada, allowing Burger King to dodge millions in US taxes. Restaurant Brands expanded in 2018 when it purchased Popeye's fast food franchise for $1.8 billion, and since then, Burger King has reclaimed its number 2 spot in the burger wars, earning $9.6 billion a year in sales, compared to Wendy's $9.3 billion. Under Restaurant Brands, Burger King's stock went up from $35 a share in 2014 to $55 in 2018, or an increase of 57%. Abroad, Burger King India has succeeded as one of the fastest growing quick service restaurants since incorporation in 2013. Thanks to their franchise agreement, they can tailor the menu to Indian tastes, promoting foot traffic and retention among their customers. There are plenty of vegetarian food options and the taste advantage of the flame grill experience. As of 2019, Burger King India has 216 restaurants across 16 states and union territories, as well as 47 cities across India. And on account of the success, they were awarded the Global Master Franchise of the Year by Burger King Corporation in 2018. Burger King has remained an iconic brand, America's number 2 burger restaurant. It made the news in 2007 when it tried to capitalize off the crypto craze, creating its cryptocurrency called Whopper coin in Russia. This move was made after Burger King Russia announced it would be accepting bitcoins for payment. That's right, it made history as the first cryptocurrency issued by a brand and was meant to be a unique loyalty program with points that could be used to purchase things outside of Burger King. Hosted on the Waves blockchain platform, a rival to Ethereum, it launched in September of 2017 with a value as high as 14 cents USD. But by January of 2018, it had fallen to less than 0.2 cents. By September 2019, its trading volume had declined to 0. Then, in February of 2019, Burger King launched an advertising campaign called Eat Like Andy, featuring a clip of the artist Andy Warhol eating a Whopper. The clip was from the documentary 66 Scenes from America and was approved for use by the Andy Warhol Foundation. The commercial premiered during Super Bowl number 53, and customers could order a Andy Warhol mystery box ahead of time from DoorDash. The box contained items like plastic bottles of ketchup and a platinum wig so you could, quote, eat like Andy. In March of 2021, Burger King was criticized for posting a tweet on International Women's Day stating, quote, "Women belong in the kitchen." It drew ire from across the internet and dozens of news publications due to its controversial content. So why would Burger King so openly annihilate its goodwill by making such a bold statement? Well, as bizarre as this might sound, it all comes down to a poorly thought up opener for their program that sought to reduce gender inequality in restaurant kitchens, a notion that was clarified in a second tweet. Despite their intentions, the initial tweet received far more engagement, forcing Burger King to post an apology and delete it just 12 hours later. In 2022, Burger King's Have It Your Way commercials went viral on social media like TikTok for its repetition and catchiness, with the ad jingles finding their way onto music streaming platforms such as Spotify in February of 2023. Burger King's latest publicity stunt featured a $1 million prize for anyone who can make the best custom Whopper. With over 200,000 ways to customize a Whopper, customers can head to a website where an AI voice guides them through the customization process with 3 to 8 toppings, visualized with AI generation. Burger King appointed judges will select the 3 best Whopper sandwiches, and the finalists will be invited to the Miami headquarters to perfect their sandwiches before they appear on actual menus nationwide. People will then be able to try these 3 Whopper creations and vote for their favorite, with the winner taking home $1 million. This competition takes have it your way to the next level, with over 50% of guests customizing their Whoppers. I'd even argue that the initiative gets customers involved in the brand, engaging customers in a way that very few brands do. Customers have until March the 17th to submit their creations and can post them on social media even if they don't win. While McDonald's still leads the world in sales, that doesn't seem to leave Burger King down and out. While Burger King is held privately, the stock for its parent company is widely available. Restaurant brands have a current value of $75 per share. Today they have over 19,000 restaurants in 100 countries and take home over $10 billion in sales annually, making Burger King an industry leader and a fine place for the masses to eat.